now have the pleasure of being joined by Mike Barber of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Mike, how's it going? Thanks so much for taking the time.
Excellent. Happy holidays. Almost Happy New Year.
Same to you. Without further ado, Mike, let's hop right in. Now, it's no secret that for UVA, it's been a little bit of a tough start to the year. What has sort of gone wrong? Is there a specific thing that you pinpointed on, or is it just kind of general, everything's gone wrong?
I mean, there have been moments where everything's gone wrong, certainly, but I think overall what you're looking at is a team that has a lot of offensive limitations. They're not a great shooting team, and the pieces they have that can be good offensively really aren't working together properly. So Jaden Gardner is a really good low post scorer, but without some outside shooting punch, teams are really having an easy time trapping him, doubling him, and that takes away how effective he can be. They haven't been as aggressive going to the rim as I think we thought they would be, and but it really all stems from the lack of that perimeter punch. Now, defensively, I think they're rounding into form. They've kind of been that young new team where they've been good defensively all game, but they've had breakdowns at key moments, which, if their offense was even decent, you'd survive because their defense is still good. The problem is you've got a terrible offense with a defense that breaks down in some key moments, and the results have been, well, you've seen what the results have been.
Yeah, Mike, you have Tony Bennett in that upper echelon of college basketball coaches after the national championship in 2019. They had some steps along the way to get there, losing in 2018 to UMBC and then coming all the way back. I don't think people will say Tony Bennett is the problem. Is this a big program issue? Do you think it's Bennett and the coaching scheme this season? Can you attribute a lot of it to the pandemic and COVID? What do you think is the root of a couple of down years since the national championship in 2019?
Yeah, one kind of funny piece was a year ago, Trey Murphy, the transfer from Rice, they expected him not to be eligible. So they kind of built the roster thinking he wasn't going to play last year, he was going to play this year. It's just one player, and that should never be the difference in being good or not. But I think that really hurt them in terms of their roster construction. I think if you put Trey Murphy on this team with some of his outside shooting and his athleticism on the perimeter, it's the piece that's missing. Now, they wouldn't be a great offense, but I think they would be much more functional. So I don't think it's a miss by the coaches. I don't think it's a problem with what they're doing, X's and O's. I think they ended up with not the roster they expected. They scrambled to rebuild it. I think they got good additions in Jaden Gardner. I think he's a guy who can be very good in the post, and Armaan Franklin. Armaan Franklin, it reminds me a lot of Sam Hauser a year ago. Sam Hauser came in and everybody was like, the kid shoots 44% from three. He's going to be lights out from the perimeter. This is going to be their offense. And then what happened? Sam Hauser couldn't hit a three for the first month and a half. Now, he did other things. He scored at the high post. He moved the ball well. His defense was good. But once he got going from three, UVA got a lot better offensively. I think we may see the same thing with Armaan Franklin, who's just been, god awful from three so far. But he's done other things. If he gets going, he can be a little bit of that Murphy piece. But right now, I know it sounds simple, but it's just bad offense derailing the whole thing.
Ethan mentioned Tony Bennett, obviously his prowess as a college basketball coach. In Charlottesville, though, given the early bounce last year, the tough start to this year, has the view on him changed at all, or is that not a concern?
No, I think probably the biggest Tony Bennett critic in Charlottesville is Tony Bennett. And you see it, it's always interesting when he's had, and you still have to win, right? We've seen it with Duke, but when he's had what I'd consider the super teams, and the one that won the national title, I think was a super team, he was pretty laid back. Right. He was kind of, I don't know if you guys are baseball guys, but I'm a big Yankees fan, and it reminded me of Joe Torre, right? Like, people always said, well, Joe Torre doesn't do anything. Well, he didn't have to do anything. He had a great team, and his job was to keep everybody even keel. And if they lost a game, to remind them that they were the best team and they were going to go win. And I think Tony Bennett, in the years that he's had that kind of a roster, has done that. If you watch him on the sideline right now, he's arguing calls. He's yelling. He's jumping up out of his chair. he knows that this team isn't very good and that every possession, it kind of matters with this group. And no, I think the fans, they're going to love him forever. And it is true. Fans are nuts. And I remember when they won the national title, how many people in my Twitter feed said, you won't hear me complain for another 5 years now that we won a national title. And then 3 games into the next season, people were and moaning and, oh, Tony this. And it's just, that's the nature of fans. But no, I don't think anybody in Charlottesville thinks Virginia would be better off with a different head coach.
So you move from the big picture view of Virginia to, more of a focused 2021 view and now into 2022. And Kihei Clark is still the point guard of this team, one of the only members who he was on that 2019 national championship team. He's been there for a while. He had that memorable moment in the Elite Eight to spark that run to the Final Four. How much, even through the struggles, how much does Kihei still mean to this team going into 2022?
Yeah, it's a good point. I wrote an article about that in the past week, I think, basically saying that whatever he does offensively, which they are asking for more, and however important he is defensively, which he is the spearhead of that defense, it's his leadership right now that matters the most. And, I talked to Isaiah Wilkins, who's a graduate assistant on this team, had been on the team before and had some great years. And he pointed out that the years that he was the leader, he had other leaders with him, right? There were 3 or 4 seniors, and he was the guy who got in everyone's face and challenged people and screamed. And then he had other guys like Jack Salt and Devin Hall to kind of pat him on the back and good cop, bad cop. Kihei Clark doesn't have that. So Kihei Clark has to do the good cop, the bad cop, the father figure, the tough guy. He's got to do it all. They're asking a lot from him in terms of that leadership. And I think he's figuring it out. And, one of the things Isaiah Wilkins told me about Kihei was he's kind of learning how to lead each guy because he can't be the same leader for everybody because it's just him. So some guys need a kick in the butt. Some guys need a pat in the back. Some guys you can yell at in practice, but you kind of got to let them go on game day. Some guys are going to work hard in practice, but you got to get them going on game day. And I think that's been a big challenge for Kihei. And I think he's done a good job, but it's a really tough ask when you're also saying, hey, this team isn't great and we need you to do more. I mean, we've seen him pass on some open threes that on a great team, we would be applauding him. We'd be like, what a smart decision to pass that shot for a better shot. But on this team, you got to just take it because there aren't guys who are knocking him down. So his leadership is going to be what either allows them to get through it and be good at the end of the year, which I think everybody looks at Virginia, looks at Tony Bennett and says, they're not very good right now, but we've seen this before. And by the end of the year, I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC, but by the end of the year, you think, okay, this could be a top 5 or 6 team in the conference and an NCAA team. Kihei Clark's leadership is going to be a lot of whether or not they get there.
Mike, you mentioned before how you feel like defensively it's a team that's getting there and is pretty sound, but it's really been the offense for UVA that has struggled. Is there a particular biggest weakness, I guess, that you could see Syracuse in particular really exploiting when these teams face off on New Year's Day? And then the flip side, is there a really big glaring Syracuse hole that you could see UVA taking advantage of?
Yeah, well, I think right now UVA unfortunately isn't in the position to take advantage of anything. I think that's going to be hard. But what's interesting when you look at Syracuse in that zone, you talk about the 2 ways that you beat the zone. You shoot a lot of threes. Well, Virginia can't do that. That's the number one weakness. They don't have that punch. So that really gives Syracuse sort of a comfort level. And the other thing is to attack at the high post. And maybe this will come, but right now they don't have that guy. We've seen guys like Jay Huff, Sam Hauser, Malcolm Brogdon, if you go back, guys who could really attack in that high post, get into the teeth of the zone, and were truly a triple threat, right? They could get to the rim because they had that kind of bounce and ability. They could pull up and knock down the shot, and they were great passers. And I just don't know that there's a guy right now that does that. So if I'm looking at Syracuse, I'm thinking, hey, this is one of those games. If you're Jim Boeheim, it's all about us, right? It's all about, hey, if Syracuse plays well, Virginia doesn't seem to have the pieces to do the things you need to do to beat Syracuse. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Armand Franklin is that player, and he just hasn't shown it yet. They certainly hope so. Maybe Jaden Gardner has more high post game than I'm giving him credit for, but we haven't seen it. So, right now, if I'm a Syracuse coach watching the tape, I'm thinking, hey, the things we do, they should work pretty darn well against this group.
It feels it's kind of like the very movable force versus the immovable object, because you have a Syracuse defense that's in the 160s on KenPom right now. And as you just explained, Mike, Virginia's offense is not built to beat the zone. So maybe you have to look at the opposite end of the floor where Virginia, you have the pack line defense. That's always gone well. But I was looking at some stuff, the way Clemson was able to get around the pack line and get to that, 65, near 70 points in that 17-point win last week. Syracuse in the top 20 on KenPom in offense. Do you think Syracuse can also take advantage of a weaker, quote unquote, weaker Virginia defense on that end of the floor?
It'll be interesting because I think Virginia's defense, when they're set, is still pretty solid. But the problem is, and I know I just keep blaming it on the offense, they're missing shots. Teams are getting up the floor in transition. Yes, Virginia focuses on defense. That's a big topic, right? I don't think if you ask any coach in the country and they had to get a game-winning shot against Virginia's set defense, they don't feel pretty good. The way you beat the Virginia defense is you get out a little in transition. I think Syracuse will have that opportunity because of missed shots from the perimeter that create those kind of longer rebounds that get you out going. It's been interesting. We saw Gardner do a nice job a couple times attacking zones where he kind of found the soft spot. But I don't think the Syracuse zone presents the same soft spots as maybe some other typical zones do. So it's going to be really interesting. I think Virginia's defense, people are going to be impressed. They're going to be like, okay, that is typical defense. But I think they're going to see, okay, how many possessions is Virginia back with five guys set? Because turnovers, guys, is the other thing. Virginia's been turning over the ball 12, 14, 16 times in a game. Not only are those empty possessions on the offense, which when you stink offensively, you can't afford, but it means you're probably not back in position defensively. So that was a long way to say, I think people are going to find it's really hard to attack Virginia's set defense, but I think the flow of the game is going to give Syracuse some opportunities to score when it isn't the true pack line five guys set.
Already 5 losses for UVA, ACC play just around the corner. How do you see the Cavaliers faring in the ACC? What's sort of your take on the conference as a whole through 2 months? Outside of Duke, is anyone really scaring you as far as that top tier is concerned?
I think they should scare Virginia just because of Virginia's weaknesses. But to your point, no, there's nobody else that seems any good. And David Teal and I, my coworker, we do a podcast, and we I think it was 3 weeks in a row where he said, who do you think the second best team in the ACC is? And I think I picked Florida State the night they got drilled by Purdue. And then we came back the next week. I said, okay, well, I look stupid, so I'm going to say it's back to being Carolina. And I think that was when they got drilled by maybe Kentucky. It was like whoever I anointed number 2 went out and didn't just get beat, but got beat up. I still think Florida State has a great roster. I still think North Carolina has a lot of talent. But yeah, I think it feels like, Duke is by far the class of the league, and in a bad way. There have been years where somebody's been the best team in the ACC, and then there have been 8 or 9 teams that are really, really good. They're just not there. I think Duke is really, really good, and I think everybody else is kind of average to below average. And the ACC wasn't good last year. That's not a popular thing to say in Charlottesville because UVA won the regular season title. But Tony Bennett will tell you, they did great things, but they won the ACC title in a down year. I think this is a second straight down year. Now, I mentioned earlier, I think Virginia will be better at the end of the year. I went into this year thinking that Virginia was going to struggle early with a new roster. Did I think they would lose 5 games before January 1st? No, I didn't think. Did I think they'd lose on the road at JMU? No, I didn't think that. Did I think they'd lose the home opener to Navy? No, I didn't think that. But I thought they would struggle some early. And I thought this is a team that can get better. I think Tony Bennett's a great coach. I think he's going to figure out some things. The problem is if you have guys who can't put the ball in the basket, that's the way basketball's played. Like there isn't coaching that can get you around that. So I think this team has limitations, but I think they will still be competitive in the ACC because of their defense, because I think Armand Franklin will eventually hit some threes, and I think they'll figure some things out. I think people who had them at number 3 or number 4 in the preseason, I don't think they get there, but 5-6 range, NCAA tournament bid, I think that's all possible.
certainly anything is possible in college basketball right now. Everything keeps changing. You can't really move on without talking about the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic that keeps raging on. Syracuse just came off a 2.5-week pause to play their first game against Brown, and now they're playing 3 games in 1 week to make up for all the time they miss. I'm not asking you to sit here and predict the future, but because everything keeps changing. But how big of an impact do you see COVID still playing on this AC now as the schedule moves into ACC play?
It feels bad, right? Like you go back a few months and it felt really good. And I remember right after the Big Ten ACC Challenge, UVA played Iowa and the arena was packed and loud. And I was like, okay, now I feel like the pandemic is maybe behind us, because now I've been in arena. I went to the NCAA tournament in Indianapolis, and not a knock on what they did. That was a great job to pull that off. And it was great to be there and to get all those teams to get the tournament played. But it didn't feel like March Madness, right? It felt like you were at one of these, holiday tournaments where there's no fans, and it just didn't feel the same. That UVA Iowa game, it felt like the real deal. And I think we were sort of licking our chops a little bit, and now it's pump the brakes. I think we realized, seeing all these bowl games canceled, seeing some of the early cancellations in basketball, knowing that people are going to make bad choices over the holiday breaks, and that the NCAA wasn't willing to just shut it down. I mean, I have a friend from another conference who told me, hey, our commissioner was pushing for, let's just shut it down for December, bring the kids back in January, get tested, make sure you didn't bring anything back to your program, and play the season. But there was no traction for that. They didn't want to shut it down. It feels like we are headed to a really disrupted January and February. My hope, and maybe I'm naive, is that by late February, March, we're getting back to normal and we head into a real March Madness. But certainly our past experience would tell us that we could be in for a really painful season.
I think it's really interesting. So Syracuse, Jim Boeheim said 14 out of 20 players and managers tested positive in their recent pause. And I was reading stuff yesterday, maybe that's a good thing. Syracuse gets that all out of the way now here in late December. And hopefully, Jim Boeheim said everyone on the team is vaccinated. I'm assuming everyone on the team is going to have to get their booster shot per the requirement by the university. And now maybe, you're immune for the rest of, the 2-3 months of the season. Maybe it might be a good thing for Syracuse that they got this out of the way now, where other teams, they've gotten by for these first couple months, and then their ACC play is disrupted.
We saw that down here a year ago with Virginia Tech football. Everybody was hammering Virginia Tech for what a bad preseason and opening month of the season. And I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if medically this is great for them. But yeah, from a college sports standpoint only, it was like they got it out of the way, and everybody had a stronger immunity. And now with the problem we're having right now, and I'm strongly on the side of kind of being safe, err on the side of caution. I think we're all in this together. And if you don't get your vaccines and your boosters, you're setting everybody up for failure. That being said, I think we are to the point where, guys are vaccinated, guys are boosted, guys are keeping their programs safe. And then there's some positive tests there. Is there harm in playing these games? And I think the question is, are you running the risk of infecting another team? Well, you are, yeah. But they're boosted and vaccinated, and I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, and I think you have to err on the side of caution. But yeah, I think teams that maybe go through it early, even though it sucks, I think it might be one where you get to March and you're saying, okay, I'm glad that we're not, as opposed to UVA, who had a few issues in season, but then got hit in the ACC tournament, right? Got sent home early from Greensboro, and that got sent to Indianapolis with 1 day of practice. Nobody wants that. So yeah, again, not a doctor, but maybe knock it out early and, lick your COVID friends and get it over with now. That's a joke. That's not really medical advice.
All right, Mike, let's go a little more on the bright side here. Last one we got for you. Fingers crossed this game gets played on New Year's Day and there's no sort of COVID disruptions or anything of that nature. What's one big thing you're going to be keeping an eye on specifically? And How do you see it going down come Saturday? You don't have to give a score if that's something you're not cool with, but who do you like emerging victorious come New Year's Day?
Yeah, I mean, you got to go by what you've seen so far, and I like Syracuse in this game. There's two variables here that could completely change my mind. If Virginia stops turning the ball over and Virginia starts making outside shots, then with their defense, which I think will be a set defense, then I think they have a really good chance to win the game and to be a really good team. I have not seen any reason to believe they're going to stop turning the ball over, and I haven't seen any reason to believe that they're going to suddenly start hitting a ton of 3-pointers. It just, show me the evidence, and then I'll say, okay, I see a path to being good again. But my guess is that Syracuse is going to play that zone well. They're going to not let Jaden Gardner get one-on-one touches in the paint. They're going to basically demand that Virginia hit outside shots. And I think Virginia is going to struggle. And then I think Virginia is going to turn the ball over, and Syracuse is going to get some transition buckets. So I think it will be on the lower scoring side, which certainly Virginia likes. It's the only way they can play. But I'm seeing more like a 60-55 Syracuse win with some transition buckets being the difference.
All right. Well, there you have it. That's Mike Barber from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy New Year.
You as well.